My name is Mallory, and I'm 32 years old. Standing backstage at Lincoln Center in New York City, I checked my phone for the 100th time, my hands trembling as I scrolled through empty notifications. In 15 minutes, I would walk onto that stage to perform my debut piano concerto with the New York Philharmonic. The moment I'd worked toward my entire life, and there wasn't a single message from my family, not one. They'd chosen my younger sister Paiga's gender reveal party instead. As the stage manager called my name and I stepped into the blinding lights, I saw them. 6 empty front row seats with reserved signs bearing my family's names, a gut-wrenching sight that made my fingers shake over the ivory keys. Before we dive into what happened next, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever felt overlooked by the people who should love you most, hit that like button, subscribe, and buckle up because this story is about to take a turn nobody saw coming, least of all me. I need you to understand that this wasn't just about one concert. This was the culmination of a lifetime of being invisible in my own family. I started playing piano at 5 years old, my small fingers barely stretching across the keys, but even then, I felt something magical happen when I touched those black and white notes. My parents, Douglas and Winifred, saw my talent but invested minimally compared to everything they poured into Paige. While I practiced alone in our basement for hours every day, they attended every single one of Paige's cheerleading competitions, her volleyball games, her dance recitals. The house echoed with my music, but their attention was always elsewhere. I remember being 17, standing backstage at the state piano competition finals, my heart pounding as I waited for my parents to arrive. They'd promised they'd be there early, promised this time would be different. I kept peering through the curtain, searching for their faces in the audience, but their seats remained empty through the entire first half of the competition. They finally rushed in 2 hours late, missing my performance entirely, because Paige had a prom dress emergency. Not a real emergency, mind you. She just couldn't decide between 2 dresses and needed Mom's opinion immediately. When I won first place and stood on that stage holding my trophy, looking out at the audience, they weren't even watching. Mom was showing Dad photos of Paige in her chosen dress. That became the pattern of my life. I learned early that my achievements came with an asterisk, always secondary to whatever Paige needed at any given moment. When I earned a full scholarship to Juilliard, based purely on my audition, my parents took us out to dinner to celebrate. But halfway through the meal, Paige announced she'd been accepted to the college cheerleading team. And suddenly, the dinner became about her. I didn't mind sharing the spotlight, not really, but it stung when I realized they never mentioned my scholarship again. While Paige's cheerleading made it into their holiday card that year, I paid my own way through college because the scholarship covered tuition but not living expenses, and my parents said they'd already stretched their budget helping Paige with her sorority fees and cheer uniforms. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously. Mornings at a coffee shop where I showed up at 5 a.m. to open, afternoons giving piano lessons to children whose parents actually showed up to their recitals, and evenings waiting tables at an Italian restaurant where I smiled through the exhaustion. I'd study music theory between orders, practice on the restaurant's old upright during my break, and collapse into bed near midnight only to wake up 4 hours later and do it all again. My hands were perpetually cramped. My back ached constantly, but I did it because I had to, because nobody was going to do it for me. The first major betrayal, the one that should have warned me, happened during my Juilliard graduation recital. It was a requirement for all graduating seniors, a solo performance in front of faculty, students, and invited guests. I'd prepared for months, selecting pieces that showcased everything I'd learned, everything I'd become. I sent my parents a formal invitation 3 months in advance, called them multiple times to confirm, even offered to pay for their hotel. They said yes enthusiastically, told me they wouldn't miss it for the world, that they were so proud of me. The day before the recital, Paige called to say she'd just been accepted to a graduate program and was throwing an impromptu celebration party. When I reminded Mom about my recital, she said, "Honey, you have recitals all the time. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing for Paige." I performed Rachmaninoff and Chopin to an audience of classmates and strangers, bowed to their applause, and pretended the empty seats in the 3rd row didn't feel like a knife twisting in my chest. Over the years, I built a wall around my expectations. I learned to stop hoping, stop inviting, stop believing that maybe this time would be different. When I landed my first paid professional concert at 25, performing with the Boston Chamber Orchestra, I mentioned it casually in our family group chat, not really expecting them to come. They surprised me by saying they'd be there, and for a dangerous moment, I let myself hope. 3 days before the concert, Paige's boyfriend broke up with her, and the family rallied around her heartbreak. Mom called to say they couldn't make it to Boston because Paige was devastated and needed family support. I played that concert with perfect technique and an empty heart, and afterward, I stopped telling them about my performances altogether. But 6 months ago, everything changed. I received an email that made me read it 3 times before I believed it was real. The New York Philharmonic wanted me as their featured soloist for their winter season, performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most challenging and beautiful pieces ever written. This wasn't just another concert. This was Lincoln Center, one of the most prestigious venues in the world. This was the kind of opportunity that could launch an international career that musicians spend their entire lives dreaming about. I screamed in my tiny apartment, called my best friend Simone, and then, after a long pause, I called my parents. Their reaction shocked me, Dad answered, and when I told him the news, he actually cried. He said he was proud of me, that he'd always known I'd make it big, that of course they'd be there. Mom got on the phone and gushed about how she'd tell everyone she knew, how she'd always believed in my talent. Paige texted me, "Congratulations," with 3 exclamation points. Said she and her husband Holden would absolutely be there. For the first time in years, maybe in my entire life, I felt seen by them. I felt like I mattered. I bought 6 premium seats in the front row 3 months in advance, spending money I didn't really have because I wanted them to have the perfect view. I wanted them to see my face as I played, wanted them to witness this triumph, wanted them to finally understand that music wasn't just my hobby or my job, but my entire soul made audible. I sent formal invitations printed on elegant cardstock. My parents, Paige and Holden, my Aunt Beatrice, and my cousin Jolene. I included the date in bold letters, marked it on the family calendar, sent reminder emails. This time, I did everything right. This time, there would be no excuses. The weeks leading up to the concert felt like floating on air. I rehearsed with the Philharmonic 6 times, feeling the power of a full orchestra behind me, the way the strings swelled beneath my melody, the way the conductor, Maestro Vincent, nodded approvingly at my interpretation. Music journalists requested interviews, asking about my journey, my inspiration, what this opportunity meant. I answered honestly, told them about the years of struggle, the jobs and sacrifices, and yes, I mentioned my family would be there to support me. Saying it out loud made it feel more real. I went shopping for a concert gown, something I'd never spent money on before, always borrowing or wearing the same black dress to every performance. This time, I found a deep emerald green dress that made me feel like someone important, someone worthy of Lincoln Center's stage. When I tried it on, the saleswoman said I looked like I was about to change my life, and I believed her. Everything felt aligned, like the universe was finally rewarding decades of dedication. 5 days before the concert, I was in the middle of a practice session when my phone started buzzing incessantly. I ignored it, focusing on a particularly difficult passage, but it kept buzzing. Finally, during a water break, I checked the family group chat and felt my stomach drop. Paige had sent a photo of a positive pregnancy test with the caption, "We're having a baby," followed by about 50 exclamation points and heart emojis. The chat exploded with congratulations, everyone sending messages of excitement and love. I added my own congratulations, genuinely happy for her despite our complicated history. She'd been trying to get pregnant for over a year, and I knew this meant everything to her. Then came the next message, the one that made my hands go cold. Paige wrote, "We're doing a gender reveal party this Saturday at 6 p.m. Everyone has to come. It's going to be amazing. Saturday, this Saturday, the same day as my concert, the same time." I stared at my phone, waiting for someone, anyone, to point out the conflict. Surely they remembered. Surely someone would say something. The messages kept coming, everyone, RSVPing yes, Mom already planning decorations, but nobody mentioned my concert. Not one person. My fingers shook as I called Mom. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice bright with excitement. Mallory, did you see? You're going to be an aunt. I forced enthusiasm into my voice, said congratulations. Then carefully, so carefully, said, Mom, that's the same night as my concert. Remember? Lincoln Center? The Philharmonic? There was a pause, a long, terrible pause, and then she said in a different tone, one I knew too well. Oh, honey. Paige didn't realize the dates conflicted. But sweetie, you understand, don't you? This is her first baby. This is such a special moment for our family. I felt something crack inside my chest. I explained, trying to keep my voice steady, that this wasn't just any concert, that I'd given them the date months ago, that this was the biggest opportunity of my career. Mom made sympathetic noises but then said, yes, but honey, you have concerts all the time. We've been to some of them. This is a once-in-a-lifetime gender reveal. Paige is so excited, and you know how emotional she gets with the pregnancy hormones. We just can't miss this. I asked if maybe Paige could move the party to Sunday, just one day later, so everyone could attend both events. Mom sighed like I was being difficult and said Paige had already booked the photographer and the venue and sent invitations, that it was too late to change everything. I hung up and immediately called Dad, hoping he'd be more reasonable. He answered from his office, distracted, clearly in the middle of something. When I explained the situation, he went quiet, and I could hear him sighing heavily. Finally, he said, your mother's already started planning the party. You know how she gets about these things. And Mallory, sweetheart, Paige is just so emotional right now with the pregnancy. We can't upset her. I felt tears burning my eyes as I said, what about upsetting me, Dad? What about my feelings? He said softly, you're strong, Mallory. You've always been strong. You'll understand. Well, catch your next big performance. Next big performance. Like there would be another Lincoln Center debut. Like opportunities like this came around all the time. I wanted to scream that there might not be a next time, that some chances only come once, but I knew it wouldn't matter. I hung up and sat at my piano bench, staring at the keys through blurred vision. 3 days before my concert, I did something I never do. I called Paige directly. She answered cheerfully, clearly expecting more congratulations. I kept my voice calm and asked if there was any way she could move the party to another day. Her tone changed immediately, going defensive. Why would I move my party? I already planned everything. I explained about the concert, about Lincoln Center, about how much this meant to me. She was silent for a moment, then said something that made my blood run cold. You're being selfish. I'm pregnant. This is about my baby, not your little concert. You've always been jealous of me. And now you can't even be happy for me on the most important day of my life. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My little concert, the most important day of her life. As if I'd deliberately scheduled my once-in-a-lifetime performance to spite her gender reveal. Before I could respond, I heard Holden in the background asking what was wrong, and then he grabbed the phone. His voice was hard when he said, "Stop harassing my pregnant wife. This is toxic behavior, Mallory. You need to work on yourself." Then he hung up on me. I sat in my apartment in stunned silence. Toxic. Selfish. Jealous. Those words echoed in my head as I tried to process what had just happened. I'd asked for one thing. One single thing. And somehow I'd become the villain. My phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Beatrice. "Mallory, honey, I heard you're upset about the party. I know you have your concert, but family comes first. Well, make sure to watch your next performance." Cousin Jolene didn't even bother responding to my message, asking if she'd still come to the concert. 3 days before what should have been the greatest night of my life, I checked the family group chat one last time. They were posting photos of gender reveal decorations, elaborate balloon arrangements in pink and blue, a dessert table covered in themed treats, plans for the photographer and the confetti cannons. The messages flew by, hundreds of them, everyone caught up in the excitement. My concert wasn't mentioned once. Not once. I turned off notifications from the group chat and tried to focus on my final rehearsals. But my heart wasn't in it anymore. The joy had been poisoned by the knowledge that the people who should have cared most didn't care at all. Mom flinched at my tone like I'd slapped her, her arms dropping to her sides. Dad looked up at me with hollow eyes, and for a moment, nobody spoke. The waiting room felt suffocating, too bright with fluorescent lights, the air conditioning too cold. Finally, Dad cleared his throat and said in a voice that sounded like gravel, "She's stable for now, but it's bad, Mallory, really bad." He explained that Paige had sustained massive internal injuries, broken ribs, a punctured lung, internal bleeding that they'd managed to control through surgery. The medically induced coma was to give her body a chance to heal without the stress of consciousness. The baby's heart rate kept dropping, going into distress, and the doctors were monitoring constantly to decide if they needed to perform an emergency delivery. "She's only 28 weeks, Mom added, her voice breaking. The doctors said if they deliver now, the baby has about a 70% chance of survival, but there could be complications. But if they don't deliver and the baby's heart rate keeps dropping, we could lose them both." Her face crumpled again, fresh tears spilling over. "We don't know what to do. The doctors keep asking us to decide. But how can we decide something like that? How can we choose?" I looked at them, these people who'd raised me but never really seen me, and felt my anger crystallize into something sharp and clear. "Family is here for each other in times of crisis," I said quietly. "That's what you told me when you chose not to come to my concert, remember? That family comes first?" Mom's face went pale. Dad looked down at his shoes. "Mallory, please," Mom started, but I cut her off. "No. You wanted me here, so I'm here. But we're not doing this thing where we pretend everything's fine and I'm just supposed to forget what you did." Aunt Beatrice stood up, her expression indignant. "Your sister is fighting for her life, and you want to talk about your concert? Really?" The word concert came out dripping with dismissal, and something in me snapped. "My debut with the New York Philharmonic," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Not just a concert, the biggest moment of my career, the thing I've worked toward my entire life. And yes, I want to talk about how every single one of you chose pink confetti over being there for me." Dad tried to intervene. "This isn't the time for this discussion." I laughed, that same bitter sound from when Sergeant Maxwell had called. "Right, it's never the time. It wasn't the time when I was begging you to come. It wasn't the time when I was sitting backstage crying. It wasn't the time when I performed to empty seats that I paid for. But now you need something from me, so here I am. And you think you get to decide when we talk about it?" Winifred stood up, her hands shaking. Paige needed us that night. She was pregnant and emotional, and this was important to her. Each word felt like a knife. "And what about what I needed?" I asked. "What about what was important to me? Or does that just not count?" Aunt Beatrice made a disgusted sound. "You're being incredibly selfish, Mallory. Your sister might die, and you're making this about you." I turned to her, and she actually took a step back from whatever she saw in my face. "No, you all made it about yourselves when you decided a gender reveal party was more important than supporting me." I'm just finally saying out loud what I should have said years ago. Before anyone could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway. "The doctor has an update on Paige Holloway. Family can come to the consultation room." We all filed down the hallway in tense silence, the air thick with everything unsaid. The consultation room was small and clinical, with a table and uncomfortable chairs. Dr. Ezra, a tired-looking woman in her 50s with kind eyes, explained that Paige's brain was showing good activity and they were cautiously optimistic about bringing her out of the coma in the next day or two. But the baby was a different story. The fetal heart rate kept dipping dangerously low, and they couldn't wait much longer to make a decision. "If we deliver now, at 28 weeks, the baby will need extensive NICU care for months," Dr. Ezra explained. "There's a good chance of survival, around 70 to 80%, but we're looking at potential complications, lung development issues, possible vision problems, developmental delays. If we wait and try to give the baby more time to develop, we risk losing both Paige and the baby. The trauma to Paige's body is significant, and the stress is affecting the baby. We need a decision within the next few hours." The room went silent. Mom started crying again, those awful, gasping sobs. Dad put his head in his hands. Aunt Beatrice looked like she might be sick. Doctor, Ezra looked at Dad and said gently, as the next of kin with medical power of attorney, we need you to authorize the emergency C-section if you choose that route. Or we can wait. But I need to be clear that waiting carries significant risk. Dad looked up at her with absolute anguish in his eyes. I can't, he whispered. I can't make that choice. What if I'm wrong? What if I choose and it's the wrong thing and they die anyway? Doctor, Ezra nodded sympathetically. I understand this is impossibly difficult, but I need a decision. Lives are at stake. Everyone was silent, paralyzed by the weight of the choice. Then Mom turned to me, her eyes desperate. Mallory, you're so good in a crisis. You're always so strong and capable. What do you think we should do? I stared at her in disbelief. Don't you dare, I said quietly. Don't you dare put this on me. Winifred reached for my hand and I pulled away. Please, sweetheart. We need you. You're the strong one. You can handle this. The strong one. The capable one. The one who could handle things because I'd never been given a choice. I'm strong because I had to be, I said, my voice shaking. I'm capable because none of you ever protected me or supported me. I've spent my whole life being strong because you made me that way. And now you want to use that strength for yourselves? Dad looked at me pleadingly. Mallory, please. We're asking for your help. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Where was my help when I needed you? Where was my support system? Where was my family? Aunt Beatrice stood too, her face flushed with anger. How can you be so cruel? Your sister is in there dying and you're worried about your feelings getting hurt? Something in me broke. I turned on her with fury I didn't know I was capable of. Feelings getting hurt? You think this is about hurt feelings? Let me tell you about being 7 years old and playing my first recital to strangers, because you were all at Paige's soccer game. Let me tell you about being 12 and having you forget my birthday because you were planning Paige's Sweet 16 4 years early. About being 17 and winning state championships while you showed up 2 hours late for prom dress emergencies. About being 22 and graduating Juilliard without you there. About being 25 and playing my first professional concert to empty seats. I was shouting now. Years of suppressed pain erupting like a volcano. And finally, about being 32 years old, living my biggest dream, performing at Lincoln Center with the New York Philharmonic, getting a 7-minute standing ovation and international recording contracts and European tour offers, and having every single one of you choose to celebrate pink confetti instead. My voice cracked. So, no, Aunt Beatrice, this isn't about hurt feelings. This is about a lifetime of being treated like I don't matter, like my accomplishments are hobbies, and my pain is drama, and my needs are negotiable. Mom was crying harder now. We didn't know it meant that much to you. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You didn't know because you never asked. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You made assumptions about what I needed and who I was, and those assumptions were convenient for you, so you never questioned them. Jolene had appeared at some point during my outburst, standing in the doorway looking shocked. We thought you understood, she said weakly. We thought you knew we loved you. I looked at her, this cousin who'd laughed about my little concert in the hospital cafeteria while I was in earshot. Love isn't just a word, I said. Love is action. Love is showing up. Love is caring about someone else's dreams as much as your own. You've never loved me, not really. You've loved the idea of me. The responsible, independent one who doesn't need anything from anyone. But I did need you. I've always needed you. I just learned to stop showing it. The nurse stuck her head in, looking uncomfortable at having walked into a family fight. Dr. Ezra needs a decision soon, she said gently. I looked at my father. This man Hode called me strong like it was an excuse not to protect me. You're her father, I said. You need to decide, not me. I'm not taking this burden too. He looked at me with something like hurt, maybe betrayal. I thought I could count on you, he said. You've always been the one I could count on. I felt tears burning my eyes but refused to let them fall. Then maybe you should have given me something to count on too. Dr. Ezra cleared her throat. I'm sorry, but I really need an answer. The baby's heart rate is dropping again. Dad looked at Mom, who was too distraught to speak, then at Beatrice, who shook her head helplessly. Finally, he turned back to Dr. Ezra and said in a broken voice, do the surgery. Deliver the baby. Save them both if you can. Dr. Ezra nodded. I'll prep the ore. The surgery will take about an hour. You can wait here or in the waiting room. She left quickly, and suddenly we were alone with the weight of the decision that had just been made. I need air, I said, and walked out before anyone could respond. I found a stairwell and sat on the cold concrete steps, finally letting myself cry. Not for them, but for everything that could have been and never was. For the family it wanted and never had. For the little girl who'd practiced piano alone in the basement, hoping someday they'd care. For the teenager who'd won competitions to empty seats. For the young woman who'd achieved impossible dreams with no one to celebrate them. I cried until I had no tears left, then washed my face in a bathroom and went back to the waiting room to wait for news about my sister and niece. The wait during Paige's emergency C-section felt endless. We sat in the waiting room, in uncomfortable silence, the kind that's heavy with unresolved conflict and fear. Mom and Dad huddled together on one couch, holding hands tightly. Aunt Beatrice sat with Jolene, whispering occasionally. I sat alone by the window, staring out at the Charleston night skyline, feeling completely disconnected from the people in the room even though they were family. 2 hours passed with no updates, then 3. Every time someone in scrubs walked past, we all looked up hopefully, but it was never for us. Finally, at nearly 1 a.m., Dr. Ezra appeared in the doorway, still in surgical garb, her mask pulled down. We all stood at once. The surgery went as well as could be expected, she said, and everyone exhaled in relief. Paige came through it, though she's very weak. We're keeping her in the medically induced coma for at least another 24 hours to let her body recover from the additional trauma of the C-section. The baby girl was delivered successfully. She weighs 3 pounds, 2 ounces. She's in the NICU now, on a ventilator, but her vitals are stable. The next 48 hours will be critical for both of them. Mom burst into fresh tears, but these were tears of relief and gratitude. Can we see them? Dad asked, his voice hoarse. Dr. Ezra nodded. You can see Paige briefly, 2 at a time, and you can view the baby through the NICU window, but no one can hold her yet. She's too fragile. Mom and Dad went first to see Paige, and I stayed in the waiting room with Beatrice and Jolene. The silence was painful. Finally, Jolene said, I'm sorry about the concert. I should have come. It was the first direct apology any of them had offered, and I didn't know what to do with it. Thank you, I said simply, because I didn't have the energy for anything more. When my turn came to see Paige, I walked into the ICU room and barely recognized her. My sister, usually so vibrant and put together, looked tiny and broken in the hospital bed. Tubes and wires connected her to multiple machines, her face bruised and swollen, a ventilator breathing for her. I stood at the edge of the room, unable to make myself go closer. Despite everything, despite all the hurt and anger, seeing her like this was devastating. She looks so fragile, I whispered to the nurse, monitoring her vitals. The nurse nodded sympathetically. She's been through significant trauma, but she's fighting. She's strong, strong. Everyone kept using that word like it was a compliment, but I was learning it was also a burden. I approached the bed slowly and looked down at Paige's unconscious face. I came, I said quietly, knowing she couldn't hear me. I dropped everything and came, even though you didn't come for me. I hope someday you understand what that means. I reached out and barely touched her hand, careful of the IV line. I'm angry at you. I'm hurt. But I'm here, because someone has to be the bigger person, and it's always been me. I stood there for another minute, then left before the emotion overwhelmed me. The NICU was on a different floor, and we took the elevator down in a group. Through a large window, we could see rows of isolettes, each containing a tiny baby fighting for life. A nurse pointed out Paige's daughter, and my breath caught. She was so incredibly small, barely bigger than a doll, her skin almost translucent, covered in wires and tubes. The ventilator obscured most of her face, but I could see she had Paige's chin, maybe Holden's nose. This tiny, fragile creature who'd been celebrated with pink confetti a week ago was now fighting for every breath. She doesn't have a name yet, Mom said, pressing her hand against the window. Paige hadn't decided. We all stood there watching this baby struggle to live, and I felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness. She was innocent in all of this family dysfunction, innocent in her father's death and her mother's injuries, Whatever anger I had toward Paige didn't extend to this little girl who'd done nothing wrong except be born too early into too much tragedy. "She's going to make it," Dad said, his voice fierce with determination. "She has to make it." The NICU nurse, whose name tag read Francine, came over to talk to us. "Are you family?" she asked kindly. "I'm the aunt," I said, and saying it out loud made it real. "Auntie Mallory." Francine smiled. "She's a fighter, this one. Her vitals are better than we expected for 28 weeks. Well, no more in the next few days. But I've been doing this 20 years, and I have a good feeling about her." That small reassurance meant everything in that moment. We stood at the window for another 10 minutes before exhaustion forced us back to the waiting room. Dad approached me as we settled back into our seats. "Mallory, thank you for coming. I know things have been difficult, but having you here means everything." I looked at him, this man who'd prioritized his other daughter my entire life, and felt that cold clarity again. "I didn't come for you," I said quietly. "I came because it was the right thing to do. There's a difference." He flinched, but I continued. "I need you to understand something. Coming here doesn't mean I forgive you. It doesn't mean we're okay. It doesn't mean I'm going to go back to being the family member you take for granted." Mom overheard and came over, her face anxious. "What are you saying?" I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. "I'm saying that things have to change. Fundamentally change. Or, I'm done." The words hung in the air like a bomb. Aunt Beatrice made a dismissive sound. "You're being dramatic." I turned to her, and she must have seen something in my expression because she went quiet. "No. I'm being honest for the first time in my life. You've all treated me terribly, and I've made excuses for you, and am not doing that anymore." Jolene stood up, defensive. "We're family. Family forgives." I laughed, but it came out sad instead of bitter. Family also shows up. Family supports each other. Family celebrates achievements. You've done none of that for me. I looked around at all of them. These people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. "Do you even know what happened at my concert? Do you know anything about that night?" They all looked uncomfortable, exchanging glances. "We assumed it went well," Mom ventured. "You're so talented." I pulled out my phone and opened the New York Times article, handed it to Dad. He read it, his eyes widening, then passed it to Mom. "This is incredible, Mallory," he said, genuine awe in his voice. "Why didn't you tell us?" I stared at him in disbelief. "Why didn't you ask? Why didn't you care enough to check?" I got a standing ovation that lasted 7 minutes. I was offered a recording contract with Deutsche Grammophon. I'm being booked for a European tour. My performance is being talked about in classical music circles around the world, and not one of you, not one, reached out to congratulate me, or ask how it went, or acknowledge it happened. Mom's face crumpled. "We didn't know it was such a big deal." That was it. That sentence summed up everything wrong with our family dynamic. You didn't know because you didn't bother to know. You made assumptions that it was just another concert, just like you've made assumptions my whole life about what I need and who I am. And those assumptions have been convenient for you, so you never question them. I stood up, suddenly too exhausted to continue this. "I need sleep. I'll be back tomorrow, but not for you. For Paige and the baby." I left the hospital and found a cheap hotel near the airport, checked in at 3 a.m. and collapsed on the bed without even taking off my shoes. My phone buzzed with a text from Simone. "How are you holding up?" I typed back, "I don't know. Everything is awful and I'm angry and sad and exhausted." She responded immediately. "You're doing the right thing. Being there doesn't mean accepting their treatment. I'm proud of you." That made me cry again, knowing someone out there actually saw me and valued me and was proud of me, even when my own family couldn't manage it. I woke up at 8 a.m. to my phone ringing. It was Dad, asking if I was coming back to the hospital. "I'll be there soon," I said groggily and dragged myself into the shower. The hot water helped clear my head, and I stood under the spray thinking about Dr. Althea's words. I could show up and maintain boundaries. I could offer support without sacrificing myself. I could do this on my terms. Dressed and caffeinated from the hotel lobby coffee, I took an Uber back to Charleston General. The family was in the same waiting room, looking like they hadn't moved. Probably hadn't. Dad was asleep in a chair, mouth open, snoring softly. Mom was on her phone, scrolling mindlessly. Beatrice was drinking coffee from a styrofoam cup. They all looked up when I entered. "Any updates?" I asked. Mom shook her head. "They're keeping Paige in the coma for now. The baby made it through the night, which is good. They said we could call the NICU for hourly updates." I sat down, keeping physical distance between myself and them. The morning dragged by with medical updates that were mostly status quo. Paige stable, baby stable, both critical but holding on. Around noon, a social worker came to talk about funeral arrangements for Holden. None of us had even thought about it, too focused on the living to deal with the dead. The social worker, a compassionate woman named Denise, gently explained that someone needed to make decisions about the body, about services, about notifying his family. Everyone looked at me. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not handling this. Holden was Paige's husband, not mine. His family should be notified, and they should make those decisions." Mom looked distressed. "But Mallory, you're so good at organizing things. We're all too upset." I felt my jaw clench. "Then figure it out together. Call his parents. Ask them what they want. But I'm not doing this for you." Denise looked between us, clearly sensing the tension, and said diplomatically, "I can help facilitate contact with his family if that would be easier." Dad nodded gratefully and went with her to another room to make calls. Afternoon brought more visitors. Friends of Paige's from Charleston started showing up, people I didn't know. They hugged Mom and cried together, shared memories of Paige and Holden, brought food nobody wanted to eat. I sat apart, watching this outpouring of community support, and felt like an outsider in my own family's tragedy. One of Paige's friends, a woman named Carolyn, approached me. "You must be the sister. Paige talks about you sometimes." I looked up at her. "She does?" Carolyn nodded. "She says you're a concert pianist." "That's so impressive." It was such a small thing. Knowing Paige acknowledged my existence to her friends, but it hit me harder than expected. "Did she mention my recent performance at Lincoln Center?" I asked, not sure why I was testing this. Carolyn looked confused. "Lincoln Center? No, I don't think so." "When was that?" "A week ago," I didn't say. "The night she had her gender reveal party." "Recently," I said instead. "It's not important." Carolyn squeezed my shoulder sympathetically and went back to the group, and I felt more alone than ever. That evening, Dr. Ezra came with news. "We're going to start bringing Paige out of the coma tomorrow morning. Her vitals are stable enough, and we want to assess her neurological function. The baby continues to hold steady, which is encouraging. She's tolerating the ventilator well, and her oxygen levels are good." This was the first genuinely good news Wed had, and everyone's spirits lifted noticeably. "Can we see the baby again?" Mom asked. Dr. Ezra nodded. "Visiting hours end at 8, so you have about 30 minutes. We trooped down to the NICU again, and this time the baby looked slightly less fragile. Maybe because we knew she'd survived another day. She was moving tiny arms and legs, fighting against the tubes, showing spirit. "She needs a name," Beatrice said. "We can't keep calling her the baby." Mom looked at me. "Mallory, do you have any suggestions?" It felt like a trap. Like if I suggested something and they didn't like it, it would somehow be my fault. But I said, "What about Meredith? It means great ruler. She's certainly fighting like a ruler." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Meredith. That's beautiful." Dad nodded agreement. "Meredith Holloway. Paige would like that." Whether Paige would actually like it was unclear since she was unconscious, but we all needed to call this baby something. "Meredith it is," I said, looking at my tiny niece. "You're Meredith, and you're going to be okay." I found myself making promises to this baby I barely knew. Promises that her life would be different, that she'd be seen and valued, that she wouldn't grow up feeling invisible like I had. That night back at the hotel, I video called Dr. Althea for our session. "How are you managing?" she asked, and I broke down describing the last 2 days. She listened patiently, then said something that shifted my perspective. "You're grieving, Mallory. Not just for what's happening now, but for the family you never had. This crisis is forcing you to confront that loss." She was right. I was mourning a fantasy. The loving, supportive family it always wanted, but never received. "What do I do with that grief?" I asked. "You feel it," she said simply. "You acknowledge it, and then you decide what kind of relationship, if any, you want going forward." The next morning brought the moment everyone had been both anticipating and dreading. Dr. Ezra and her team began the process of waking Paige from the medically induced coma. We weren't allowed in the room, but the doctor updated us regularly. First, they reduced the sedation. Then they watched for responses, eye movement, reactions to stimuli, signs of consciousness. It took hours. Finally, around 2 p.m., a nurse came out and said, "She's awake. She's confused and in pain, but she's conscious and responsive." Mom and Dad rushed to her room, and I waited, giving them time alone with her. When my turn came, I walked in slowly. Paige's eyes were open, unfocused, and glazed with pain medication, but definitely awake. She looked at me without recognition at first, then her face crumpled. "Mallory," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the ventilator tube they'd removed. "You came?" I moved closer to the bed. "I came." She started crying, weak tears sliding down her bruised face. "Holden?" she asked, and the hope in that one word broke my heart. Mom, who was still in the room, took Paige's hand and said gently, "Sweetheart, Holden didn't make it. He died in the accident. I'm so sorry." The sound that came out of Paige was inhuman, a keening wail of pure anguish. Her whole body shook with sobs, monitors beeping frantically as her vitals spiked. Nurses rushed in, increased her pain medication, tried to calm her. "My baby," she gasped between sobs. "What about my baby, doctor?" Ezra was there suddenly, speaking calmly. "Your baby is alive, a little girl. She's in the NICU, and she's fighting hard. We delivered her to save both of you." Paige's eyes found mine again. "You'll help me, won't you?" she asked, desperate and broken. "You'll help with the baby?" I felt trapped by that question, by her vulnerability, by the weight of family obligation. "I'm here now," I said carefully. "Well, take it one day at a time." It wasn't a promise, but she seemed to take it as one, her grip on my hand tightening weakly. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know you're mad about the concert. I'm sorry. With everything happening, I forgot it was the same day. Forgot. She forgot. Even now, even after everything, she was minimizing it." "Paige, don't," I said quietly. "Just focus on getting better." She looked confused by my response, probably expecting me to say it was okay, to absolve her, to play my familiar role of the understanding sister who asked for nothing. But I couldn't do that anymore. "I need to rest," she said, her eyes already closing from the medication. "Stay. Please stay." I looked at Mom, who nodded encouragingly, desperately wanting me to say yes. "I'll be here," I said, committing to nothing specific. Paige was asleep again within seconds. Outside the room, Dad pulled me aside. "Thank you for not upsetting her," he said. "She's so fragile right now." I looked at him incredulously. "When do I get to be fragile, Dad? When is it my turn to be the one everyone tiptoes around?" He looked genuinely confused by the question. "You're strong, Mallory. You don't need that kind of support." And there it was again, that toxic assumption. "Everyone needs support," I said. "I've just never gotten it, so you think I don't need it. But I do. I always have." That evening, Simone called with news. The Deutsche Grammophon people are getting impatient. They need an answer about the recording contract by the end of the week. Rosalind also says the European venues are starting to finalize spring schedules. You need to make some decisions. Real life, my actual life, was continuing while I was trapped in this hospital dealing with family drama. "Tell them I need one more week," I said. "I'll be back in New York by then." After I hung up, I realized I'd made a decision without conscious thought. I was leaving. I wasn't staying in Charleston indefinitely to be their support system. I had a life, a career, dreams that mattered just as much as their crisis. On day 3 of my Charleston stay, I asked my family to meet me in the hospital's private consultation room. All of them came: Mom, Dad, Beatrice, Jolene, and Paige in a wheelchair, still weak but insisting she needed to be present. They settled into chairs looking wary, probably sensing this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. I stood rather than sat, needing the psychological advantage of height. "I have things to say, and you're going to listen to all of it without interrupting." I began. Dad started to speak, and I held up my hand. I said without interrupting. For the next 20 minutes, I laid it all out. Every memory of neglect, every time it'd been overlooked, every achievement they'd missed or minimized. I talked about being 7 years old and learning that my accomplishments didn't warrant their attention, about being 17 and winning competitions while they prioritized prom dresses, about being 22 and graduating Juilliard to an audience of strangers, about being 25 and performing professionally to empty seats, and finally, about being 32 and experiencing the pinnacle of my career while they celebrated pink confetti. I begged you to come to Lincoln Center, I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay composed. I sent invitations months in advance. I reminded you constantly. I paid for premium front row seats that I couldn't afford because I wanted you to have the best view of my triumph. And you chose a party. You chose balloons and cake and a gender reveal over me. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't wipe them away. Do you know what it felt like to walk onto that stage and see those 6 empty seats? Do you have any concept of how that destroyed me? Paige was crying too, her face twisted with what looked like genuine remorse. I didn't know it would hurt you that much, she whispered. You didn't know because you didn't ask, I said. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You made an assumption that your gender reveal was more important than my concert, and that assumption was based on a lifetime of my needs being treated as less important than yours. I turned to my parents, and you raised us this way. You created this dynamic where Paige was the golden child who needed constant support, and I was the scapegoat who had to be independent and strong and never need anything. Mom was sobbing. We didn't mean to do that. We thought we were doing right by both of you. I shook my head. Intent doesn't erase impact. You hurt me, deeply and repeatedly. And I've made excuses for you my whole life because I wanted to believe you loved me as much as you loved Paige. But your actions told a different story. Dad looked devastated. We do love you, Mallory. We're so sorry. We failed you. It was the first time Head fully acknowledged it, and hearing those words from him cracked something open in my chest. I accept your apologies, I said carefully. But apologies aren't enough. Words are easy. Actions are what matter. I outlined my terms. I was going no contact for 6 months. They could text updates about Meredith, but I wouldn't engage beyond brief responses. After 6 months, if they'd done family therapy and individual work on themselves, we could discuss rebuilding a relationship. But things will never go back to how they were, I said firmly. I'm not going back to being the family member you take for granted. I'm not going back to being the one who gives everything and gets nothing. Aunt Beatrice protested. 6 months is extreme. I looked at her. What's extreme is a lifetime of emotional neglect. What's extreme is missing the biggest night of my career for a party. What's extreme is expecting me to sacrifice my life to support you through a crisis when you've never supported me through anything. Jolene spoke up. But we're family. Family forgives. I nodded. I'm working on forgiveness, but forgiveness doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. I can forgive you and still protect myself from you. Paige wheeled herself closer. Will you come back? After 6 months? Her voice was small, scared. I looked at my sister, this woman who'd been both victim and perpetrator in our family's dysfunction. Maybe. If things genuinely change. If you all do the work. If you show me through actions, not words, that you value me. I paused. But understand this. I'm leaving Charleston today. I have a career. I have a recording contract to sign and a European tour to plan. I have a life that matters just as much as yours, and I'm not abandoning it to be your support system. Mom looked panicked. But Meredith, the baby needs family. I felt that familiar guilt trying to take hold, but I pushed back against it. Meredith has doctors, nurses, grandparents, and a mother. She'll be fine. I'll visit when I can, but I'm not moving my life here. The guilt on their faces was palpable, but I steeled myself against it. Doctor, Althea had prepared me for this, for the pushback and manipulation that comes when you set boundaries with people used to you having none. Before I left, I went to the NICU alone to see Meredith. She was slightly bigger, slightly stronger, fighting her way through each day. I pressed my hand against the isolette's plastic barrier. Goodbye for now, little one. I hope when you're older, your family treats you better than mine treated me. I hope you grow up knowing you're valued and seen and celebrated. And if they don't do that for you, you call your Aunt Mallory, and I'll remind you that you deserve better. The NICU nurse Francine came over. She's doing remarkably well. Strong little fighter. Like her aunt, I thought but didn't say. My goodbye to Paige was brief. She clung to my hand, begging me not to leave yet, saying she needed me. You'll be okay, I said firmly. You're stronger than you think. It was something people had said to me my whole life, and I realized it was both true and irrelevant. Being strong shouldn't mean being abandoned. Paige looked at me with something like understanding finally dawning. I've been horrible to you, haven't I? She said quietly. My whole life. I've been horrible. I didn't confirm or deny it, just said, work on yourself. Be better. For Meredith's sake if not for mine. At the airport, waiting for my flight back to New York, I felt lighter than I had in years. Saying no, setting boundaries, walking away from people who demanded everything and gave nothing. It was terrifying but also liberating. I checked my messages and saw one from Paige that must have been sent just after I left. Thank you for coming. I don't deserve you. I'll try to deserve you someday. I didn't respond but didn't delete it either. Maybe someday she would deserve my presence in her life. Maybe they all would. But that was their work to do, not mine. Landing in New York felt like coming home to myself. Simone picked me up from the airport, took one look at my face, and said, "You did it, didn't you? You set boundaries." I nodded, suddenly exhausted. I did, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. She hugged me tight. "I'm so proud of you." We went back to my apartment, ordered takeout, and I told her everything. She listened with that fierce loyalty I'd come to depend on, validating every feeling, supporting every decision. The next day, I met with Rosalind and signed the Deutsche Grammophon recording contract. We scheduled the European tour for spring. London, Paris, Vienna, Berlin, Prague, all the cities I'd dreamed of performing in. I had sessions planned with Dr. Althea twice a week to process everything. I started composing again, a new piece inspired by everything that had happened. I called it Empty Seats, and it was the most personal thing I'd ever written, full of longing and anger and grief and ultimately, liberation. 3 weeks after returning to New York, I received a text from Mom with a photo of Meredith, now off the ventilator, and breathing on her own. The message said simply, "She's doing better. We're starting therapy, like you asked. We want to do better." I responded, "Good. Keep going." That was all, but it was something. 4 months later, Dad sent a longer message about what they were learning in family therapy, about the patterns they'd perpetuated, about their genuine remorse. I read it, appreciated it, but maintained my boundary. 6 months to the day after leaving Charleston, I received a video call request from my parents. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. They were sitting together in their living room, looking nervous. "Thank you for answering," Mom said. "We wanted to tell you in person that we've been doing the work, therapy individually and as a family. We're learning about the harm we caused." Dad added, "We understand if you never want a relationship with us again, but we wanted you to know we're trying to be better people, whether or not you're in our lives." It was the first time they'd ever acknowledged that my presence in their lives was a gift, not an obligation. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "I'm not ready to rebuild yet, but I'm glad you're doing the work." We talked for 10 more minutes, awkward but genuine, before I said I needed to go. After hanging up, I felt something unexpected. Hope. Not hope that things would go back to how they were, because I never wanted that, but hope that maybe someday we could build something new and healthier. My European tour in the spring was everything I'd dreamed. I played to sold-out audiences, received standing ovations in every city, had my photo in European music magazines. The album I recorded hit #1 on classical music charts. Critics called me one of the most exciting pianists of my generation. And through it all, I was surrounded by people who genuinely supported me. Simone, who flew out to see the London performance. Rosalind, who became not just my agent but a friend. Fellow musicians who celebrated my success without jealousy. Dr. Althea, who helped me heal decades of wounds. One evening in Vienna, sitting in my hotel room after a particularly triumphant performance, I thought about the empty seats at Lincoln Center. They'd represented everything wrong with my family, but they'd also become a symbol of my strength. I'd played for those empty seats and received a standing ovation anyway. I'd built a career without their support and succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. Their absence hadn't stopped me. In some ways, it had freed me. I thought about little Meredith, now 7 months old according to the photos Paige occasionally sent. She was thriving, hitting milestones, a miracle baby who'd beaten the odds. I'd sent gifts for her, and planned to visit when I returned to the States. But on my terms. Not because I was obligated to. I was learning to love my family from a distance, to have compassion for them without sacrificing myself to them. It was a balancing act, and I didn't always get it right, but I was trying. Sitting at the piano in my Vienna hotel room, I played the opening bars of Empty Seats, the piece that had come from my deepest pain. But now it sounded different to me, less like grief and more like strength. Those empty seats had broken my heart, but they'd also taught me the most important lesson of my life. I didn't need their validation to be worthy. It'd always been worthy. It'd always been enough. It had just taken me 32 years and the worst betrayal imaginable to finally believe it. So what did I learn from all of this? I learned that you can be kind without being a doormat. You can forgive without forgetting. You can love people from a distance when up close they hurt you. I learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up for you, who celebrates your victories, who sees you when you're invisible to everyone else. I learned that setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary, and anyone who tells you otherwise is someone who benefits from you having none. Most importantly, I learned that your dreams matter. Your accomplishments aren't just anything. Your pain isn't drama. Your needs aren't negotiable. And if the people in your life can't see that, if they consistently choose other things over supporting you, that's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their limitations. You deserve to be celebrated, not just when it's convenient for others, but always. You deserve to have people in your life who show up for your big moments, who understand what those moments mean to you, who would never dream of choosing confetti over your triumph. And if they don't show up, play anyway. Play for the standing ovation from strangers who appreciate your music even when family doesn't. Play for yourself, for the little kid inside you who had dreams. Play for every person who's ever felt overlooked or undervalued or invisible. Play until those empty seats don't hurt anymore, until you realize you never needed them filled to be magnificent. Because you are magnificent, with or without an audience, with or without their approval, with or without their love. My family abandoned my big night for my sister's gender reveal party. A week later, I got a call about her accident, and I showed up because that's who I am. But showing up didn't mean going back to being invisible. It meant showing them who I'd become in spite of them. Strong, successful, and finally, after 32 years, unwilling to accept less than I deserved. The empty seats at Lincoln Center set me free, and I've been taking standing ovations ever since. So let me ask you, have you ever felt invisible to the people who should see you most? Have you ever achieved something amazing only to have it dismissed or overlooked? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. You're not alone in this. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama and finding your worth, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that their dreams matter just as much as anyone else's. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that you deserve to be celebrated. You deserve to be seen. And you deserve people in your life who show up. Keep fighting for your dreams. Keep setting boundaries. And keep taking your standing ovations. You've earned every single one of them.